Good evening. We had two sets of economic data out today, one positive, the other not so positive. On the inflation front, wholesale prices have plummeted to a near 5-year low. On the trade front, the trade deficit has more than doubled. On the news tonight, we'll make sense of the numbers for you and what it means for your everyday life. Welcome to the show. I'm Zaka Jacob. We start with the headlines, as always. Riding on falling food and fuel prices, wholesale price inflation dips to a 5-year low in September. The question now is, will the RBI cut key interest rates at its next policy meet? The big business story, DLF stocks go into a tailspin after SEBI's order. Shares of the realty developer plunged 30% in one day. DLF has lost 7,500 crores in market value. Andhra Pradesh estimates that the damage caused by cyclone Hudhud could be tens of thousands of crores. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announces interim relief of 1,000 crores. And the Ebola panic spreads to more countries. The World Health Organization warns that the cases of Ebola could go up to 10,000 in the next 2 months. The UK starts screening passengers at Heathrow. And our top story on the news tonight. Softening food prices have pulled down wholesale price inflation to a near 5-year low. The figure is 2.38%. Government data also showing that food inflation fell to a nearly 33-month low of a mere 3.52%. Now, the big question is, this fall gives the RBI more headroom to cut interest rates, but will they do that?
There is good news for consumers ahead of Diwali. A day after retail inflation fell to its lowest since January 2012, WPI inflation came down to a 5-year low of 2.38%. WPI-based inflation was at 3.74% in August and 7.05% in September 2013. Food inflation is also down to a nearly 2.5-year low of 3.52%. It has been on the decline since May.
Well, it is a matter of great assurance that the inflation has come down to the 5 years lowest level. Our government was elected on the whole idea to bring in inflation.
Wholesale inflation in onion contracted to 58.12% in September compared to a contraction of 44.7% in August. Inflation in vegetable prices as a whole shrunk to 14.98% in September. Experts believe the figures indicate inflationary pressure is waning for now.
इन्फ्लेशन का रेट कम हुआ है, यानी महंगाई बढ़ने की जो रफ्तार मात्र कम हुई है, उसमें मेन रीज़न जाता है कच्चा तेल, क्रूड ऑयल की प्राइसेस को. इन्फ्लेशन कम हुई है तो हमारी जीडीपी ग्रोथ बढ़ने की पॉसिबिलिटी हो जाएगी.
All eyes are now on the Reserve Bank of India, which will bring its next monetary policy review on December 2nd. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So while there was great news on the inflation front, there's been very disappointing news on the trade front. Let's try and make sense of the numbers for you by speaking to Dr. Aditya Srinivas. He's an economist with the BSE Stockbrokers Forum. Welcome to the program, Mr. Srinivas. So let's first talk about the inflation data. We had consumer price index yesterday at a 2.5-year low. Today we have the wholesale price index at a 5-year low. The question, at least from a common man's point of view, is will this lead to an imminent rate cut? What's your reading?
Yes, the way inflation data has come down. See, basically yesterday we had this CPI inflation coming to 6.46. That was also a remarkable fall in the inflation data. And today also it has come to a 5.5 years low WPI, which now stands at 2.38%. So definitely, see, we have to understand one thing. If we see historical trend, then normally in the month of, that is from basically September onwards and till January, inflation always has a downward spiraling because there is a good harvest this time. Plus we had a relatively better monsoon as compared to what was earlier projected. So keeping that framework in mind, definitely the inflation has softened and relatively the RBI's inflation-based target policy, the target of 6% is likely to be achieved. So in this case, definitely the RBI has now lot of elbow room to reduce the interest rates in this next coming monetary policy, that is by this year end or at least by the beginning of next year, we should see some rate cuts from the Reserve Bank of India.
December 2nd is their next quarterly policy meeting. But that was the positive data that we had today. The not so positive data was on the trade front, with the trade deficit jumping more than twice to over $14 billion. Tell us what's happening there and how much pressure will that put on the growth story?
Yes, see, unfortunately, the trade deficit has increased, and in case if you see the trade deficit, the exports went up by only 2.38%, but the imports have gone up by 20%. In imports also, the problem was that the oil import has gone up by 10%, but the non-oil imports went up by 36%. Now, if we see the non-oil component, around 4 billion, there has been rise in import value in the absolute terms. But out of that, around 2 billion was only due to gold imports. So, and then 1 billion was roughly estimated for gems and jewellery.
Okay.
So, one has to understand that still gold is creating an issue as far as the imports are concerned. And still, if we see, primarily gold as an asset class has a phenomenal rise in the last 5 years because there was global turmoil and it was considered as a safe asset. In fact, the financial savings of our economy went down from 12% to 8%, and this gap of 4% was also consumed by gold as an asset class. So that is something actually which worries the government. Though as a matter of precaution, government had increased the import duty from 2% to 10%, and that had helped to control the current account deficit. But again, still unfortunately, if we see, there has been a rude shock on the trade data front, and definitely that shows that we need to still have more exports and try to reduce imports, and that is why the Make in India mission of the government, it is clearly on the right path, that we need to have more of indigenous manufacturing.
And this is coming on the back of very disappointing industrial production numbers which were out, which shows that factory activity is very, very thin. But thanks very much for joining us, Dr. Aditya Srinivas from the BSE Stockbrokers Forum, giving us his thoughts and perspective into the two bits of economic data that were out today. One on the inflation front, where there is something to cheer about, and the other on the trade front, where there isn't so much cheer, I'm afraid. Not so much cheer, though, for one of India's, in fact, India's biggest realty firm, DLF. It's one of the biggest decisions in the history of corporate governance here in India. Shares of the real estate giant plunged more than 25% today in a single day of trade, just a day after SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, banned the company, as well as its top management, including Chairman KP Singh, from accessing the capital markets for 3 years. DLF was found guilty of engaging in fraud and unfair trade practices. The stock today closed at $105. That's a record low. As of June of this year, the company had an outstanding debt of 19,000 crores. SEBI found 3 key violations: non-disclosure of related party transactions, non-disclosure of financial details of subsidiaries, and inadequate disclosure of outstanding litigation. Now, this issue goes back 7 years when DLF came out with an initial public offer. That was in 2007. That issue raised more than 9,000 crores for the company. Now, shifting focus to the political economy, and the CPM has taken the government to task over allegations that the government is trying to dilute the provisions of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Now, the party says this will amount to robbing poor people of their legal rights. Leading economists have also drawn the Prime Minister's attention to this matter.
The CPM has warned against any attempt to limit the scope of Manrega. The party feels that doing so will be an infringement of a legal right given to the poor and the workers.
आप सार्वजनिक अधिकार को सिर्फ बैकवर्ड डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में लागू करना चाहते हैं। आप लेबर बजट का रेशियो को कम करके कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स का बोलबाला चाहते हैं। नरेगा मजदूरों के लिए है, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स की भला के लिए नहीं है।
The matter was debated extensively at the 2-day meeting of the CPM Politburo. Party leaders alleged that pressure was being brought about on the state governments to spend less on the scheme. Not only this, they also questioned the government's attempts to make sweeping changes in labour laws as well.
एक तरफ मोदी जी स्लोगन दे रहे हैं मेक इन इंडिया, इंडिया में बनाओ, और जो इंडिया में बने हुए मजदूर किसान हैं उनकी तमाम आप उनको दास या गुलाम बनाकर उनके अधिकार को समाप्त कराकर, तो जब इंडिया में बनाओगे और इंडिया में बने हुए मजदूर किसान का फायदा नहीं होगा तो फायदा किसका होगा?
Last week, leading economists wrote to the Prime Minister that the government had no powers to dilute the provisions of Manrega. They also said that the act was a powerful tool with the government in order to prevent the migration of the rural poor to the cities. Shamsundar's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, we're going to take a break here on the news tonight. When we return, Pakistan's attempt to internationalize the Kashmir issue fails yet again. The United Nations issued a tepid statement. We'll tell you how and why that happened when the news tonight returns. Welcome back to the news tonight. Pakistan's latest efforts to internationalize the Kashmir issue has come a cropper. Pakistan sought the United Nations intervention on the Kashmir issue after the recent flare-up along the border. The UN simply said that India and Pakistan need to resolve all their outstanding differences through dialogue. Sartaj Aziz, advisor to the Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif on national security and foreign affairs, had written to the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon. In that letter, Mr. Aziz said that Pakistan believes the UN has an important role to play in promoting the peaceful resolution of the Kashmir issue. The Secretary-General's office in response issued a statement simply saying, and I quote it here, "It's concerned about the recent escalation of violence along the line of control between India and Pakistan. The UN deplores the loss of lives and the displacement of civilians on both sides." Here in India, reactions have been coming from across the political spectrum.
हमारी सरकार को भी चाहिए कि सख्ती के साथ न सिर्फ बात करे, सख्त कदम उठाए। पाकिस्तान एक तरफ सीज फायर को वायलेट करता है, दूसरी तरफ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर हमें बदनाम करने की कोशिश करता है।
ये हमारा मामला है कश्मीर, पाकिस्तान घुस गया है तो पाकिस्तान के साथ कैसे निपटना है, ये हिंदुस्तान को उस बारे में ठोस कदम लेने पड़ेंगे।
यूनाइटेड नेशंस ने बहुत उचित काम किया है। पाकिस्तान इस तरह की गलत बातें कई बार कर चुका है और भारत ने हमेशा उसका खंडन किया है। यूनाइटेड नेशंस ने हम लोगों की बात मानी है कि आपसी बातचीत से ही समस्या का हल हो सकता है।
We're also tracking the fallout of Cyclone Hudhud. After taking on the cyclone head-on, the city of Visakhapatnam is slowly trying to get back on its feet. The state government claims the damage runs into tens of thousands of crores. The Eastern Power Distribution Company alone estimates to have suffered losses in excess of 40,000 crores. The Prime Minister visited the state today. He announced interim relief package of 1,000 crores. The cyclone, meanwhile, has moved inland, causing rains in many parts of northern India.
A city in shambles, Visakhapatnam is trying to pick up the pieces. Fuel and food shortage triggered anger at many places on Tuesday.
We have not been getting any petrol. We are roaming all the entire petrol bunks with empty bottles only.
When we are asking, they're saying that, they got orders from the collector not to give the petrol, only to government officials and hospitals. But they're selling in front of us, they're selling in black.
The Prime Minister arrived for a first-hand look at the damage. He announced an assistance of 1,000 crore rupees for rebuilding the city.
भारत सरकार की तरफ से एक इंटरिम असिस्टेंट के रूप में 1,000 करोड़ रुपया भारत सरकार से तरफ देने की मैं घोषणा करता हूं और तुरंत सर्वे होने के बाद आगे भी भारत सरकार आंध्र के साथ, वाइजाग के साथ पूरी तरह साथ रह करके इन समस्याओं से बाहर निकलने के लिए जो भी आवश्यकता होगा उसको पूरा करेंगे।
Government staff and residents cleared the roads, removing uprooted trees and restoring broken down power and telecom lines. The cyclone damaged thousands of houses in Andhra Pradesh. The Visakhapatnam airport building was one of the places that bore the maximum brunt. In Srikakulam, East Godavari and Vijayanagaram districts, banana, sugarcane and rice crops were totally destroyed. The damage in neighbouring Odisha was relatively less.
We have evacuated 233,000 people and that is the final figure. And today we will provide them noon meal and after that they would, those who are willing they can go back. And those who have lost their houses, I have already ordered the collectors to provide them immediately polythene sheets, partially whatever, and send them back. And whatever admissible relief, as per the relief code, the collector can administer that.
Even as thousands of people spent a third night in cyclone shelters, the Navy announced Operation Leher to carry out an aggressive relief operation. 19 helicopters were dispatched to drop food and water packets to affected villages.
Efforts are being made in coordination with the state agencies to get this relief material to the various surrounding villages and wherever it's required.
The death toll due to Cyclone Hudhud rose to 24 as the weakened storm moved inland. The after effects were felt in North India, Uttar Pradesh and even Delhi received heavy rainfall in some parts. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Maharashtra and Haryana are all set to witness epic poll battles on Wednesday. The split in two long-standing political alliances in Maharashtra just 3 weeks before the polls. one the BJP and Sena, the other the Congress and NCP. That has now set the stage for an election that could dramatically alter the political map of Maharashtra. The big question is, will there be a clear verdict? Will one single party win the election on its own? Or if not, what kind of realignment can take place? Haryana, on the other hand, is also going to witness a multi-cornered contest. Despite a high-pitched campaign by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he addressed more than 10 rallies in Haryana. The Congress is looking for a record third term under the leadership of Chief Minister Bhupinder Singh Hooda. The BJP, for the first time in its history, is contesting all 90 seats in Haryana alone. The Election Commission says it's taken all necessary steps to ensure free and fair polling in both these states. Well, talk about elections. One state which is due for polls is Jammu and Kashmir, and Chief Minister Omar Abdullah has said the situation in his state is not conducive for elections. The Chief Minister's comments coming soon after reports emerged that the Election Commission could hold assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir despite the widespread damage caused there by the recent floods. Abdullah also warned that Srinagar could see 0% turnout. Elections are scheduled to be held in the state in December this year. The 6-year term of the 87-member assembly ends on the 19th of January 2015.
Look, my party has made it very clear that we do not believe this is an opportune time to have elections. We believe that at this point in time when people are struggling to rebuild their lives, please understand these are not sparsely populated rural areas that were inundated with floods. Your most heavily populated areas of Kashmir Valley were hit with floods. Tomorrow when 0% turnout happens in Srinagar, who will you blame for that? You most certainly can't blame me, because I'm not the one who's pushing for elections now. You'll have to blame those people who are trying to heap insult on injury by adding more misery to people and calling for elections at this point in time.
And some news that concerns consumers, particularly if you're interested in online retail. The Enforcement Directorate says it's now probing Flipkart's massive discount sale that happened last week. Now, this is following complaints from traders against the online retailer. The agency is said to be inquiring into whether the company flouted any retail rules during the single-day sale. They called it the billion-day sale on October the 6th. Traders' bodies had asked the government to take steps to monitor as well as to regulate online businesses. They allege unfair competition and the lack of a level playing field. Flipkart's Big Billion Day sale, it offered steep discounts on all kinds of products. Following reports of an investigation, the company said it had complied with the laws of the land and will cooperate with all the authorities if and when required. All the other news and updates that made the news tonight from across the country in our special segment, Nationwide. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister John Braid today met External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj here in Delhi. Mr. Braid is on a 5-day visit to India to finalize arrangements on security, defense, counterterrorism, space and nuclear cooperation. A court in Delhi convicted all the 5 accused in the abduction and gang rape of a BPO executive at South Delhi's Dholakwa in 2010. The sentence will be pronounced Friday. The BPO executive from the northeast was returning home after office when she was abducted. Bihar Chief Minister Jitan Ram Manjhi today indicated that Nitish Kumar may not be the JDU's chief ministerial candidate for next year's assembly elections in the state. He says the issue will be decided in consultation with alliance partners. Jammu and Kashmir Police Inspector Shakti Devi was awarded the United Nations International Female Police Peacekeeper Award 2014. The award is for meritorious work with the UN mission in Afghanistan. Shakti Devi is currently deployed at the UN Assistance Mission in that country. All right, time for another break here on the news tonight. When we return, all the international stories, including Britain promising technical support as well as training to Kurdish forces, but no ground troops even as the battle for Kobani continues. The news tonight returns in 2 minutes. Welcome back to the news tonight. Let's focus now on international stories. The Norwegian government has said it's going to act as a facilitator for investment by its companies into India. The two sides are hoping to have an agreement on tax to provide an adequate environment for long-term investments. Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg and President Pranab Mukherjee led the two sides in signing several important agreements. These include over a dozen MOUs in the fields of science and technology, defense and education. An agreement on the exemption of visas for holders of diplomatic and official passports was also signed. Earlier in the day, the president urged Norwegian companies to join the Make in India initiative as he invited investors and entrepreneurs to explore possibilities of investment in India's infrastructure sector.
Relative size of our economies.
Promising technical support as well as training to Kurdish forces who are battling IS militants in Iraq, Britain's Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said that Iraq should take the lead in this fight. Mr. Hammond also added he doesn't envisage Western ground forces either in Iraq or in Syria, even as the Kurds recaptured a key hill in Kobani after 10 days.
Thick smoke rising from the Syrian border town of Kobani as explosions rock the town a few kilometers away from the Turkish border. As the battle against Islamic State gains momentum, Kurdish fighters reclaimed a strategically important hilltop Tal Shair west of Kobani. Kurdish fighters hoisted their flag on the hill where the IS flag had been flying only on Monday. There have been casualties on both sides, with fighting on for nearly a month in Kobani. The US-led coalition has reiterated its willingness to further support Kurdish forces, but says Iraq has to take the lead in the combat against IS.
We absolutely are prepared to provide personnel for specialist roles, for training roles, but not to take the combat lead. That combat lead has to come from Iraqi security forces, Peshmerga, and in Syria from the moderate opposition Free Syrian Army forces.
But there's growing pressure on the coalition to do more to stop the Islamic State. Military chiefs from some 20 countries are meeting in Washington to hash out a strategy to counter the militants. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, another big international story we've been tracking for months now. The Ebola epidemic could be the worst health emergency in recent times. The World Health Organization is now re-evaluating the death rate to 70%. Its previous estimate was 50%. As new cases were reported today, both in Germany as well as in the United States, the WHO is warning there could be up to 10,000 new cases in the next couple of months.
The Ebola crisis is fast spreading outside West Africa. Cases of the deadly disease have now been reported from Spain, United States, with the latest in Germany. A Sudanese UN medical worker suffering from Ebola died early on Tuesday, just a week after being diagnosed.
Der Symptombeginn war am 3.10. Entsprechend schnell hat dort auch dann die UN reagiert. Die Diagnosesicherung ist am 5.10. erfolgt in Liberia mit den internationalen Labors, die dort vorhanden sind und die auch eine sehr valide Diagnostik machen.
A Spanish nurse has been fighting the disease for a week now. Medics attending to her are optimistic of her recovery.
Bueno, intentar darle lo mejor, el tratamiento óptimo que tenemos. Cada día que pasa la enfermedad va a nuestro favor. Ya llevamos por 15 días desde que empezaron los síntomas y es un factor bueno para ella, ¿no? Que cada día que pasa.
Another patient in the United States has been put in isolation at a hospital in Kansas as officials wait his test results.
He's a suspect case. We don't know if he has it. I think overall, given that he hasn't worsened today, it would make me think maybe a low-risk patient for Ebola, but we won't know that until we get the test results back for sure.
Concerns in Liberia have been sidelined as healthcare workers ignored calls to strike over poor pay and working conditions. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
In Hong Kong, the police today said they would make an announcement before clearing protest sites that have been occupied by pro-democracy activists for over 2 weeks now. The police reckon this will allow protesters time to leave and not lead to skirmishes, as was seen in the last couple of days. Now, for the second day running today, hundreds of police dismantled barricades near government offices, as well as in one major shopping district. But unlike on Monday, things went off rather smoothly today. There were no confrontations and traffic was seen flowing freely. But other major protest sites remain intact, one in Admiralty, the other in Mongkok. Pro-democracy demonstrators are remaining defiant even after 2 weeks of protests. The police were earlier criticized for using tear gas within the first 24 hours of this protest, but have since adopted a rather patient approach, hoping to wear down the protesters.
The operations today were smooth. Both Hennessy Road and Queens Road are now reopened. If anyone tries to replace or reinforce the obstacles again, police will not tolerate and take decisive enforcement actions to stop such illegal acts.
And staying with East Asia, putting to rest all speculation about his 6-week absence from the public eye, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un today visited a newly built residential district in the capital Pyongyang. Pictures released by state media there showing Kim walking with the aid of a black cane. Now that, of course, lends weight to the theory that he's been receiving treatment for a leg injury. There have also been reports that he might be treated for an illness that's affected his ability to walk. This is Kim's first public appearance since the 3rd of September, when he attended a concert with his wife. The leader's 6-week disappearance from public view had sparked debate not just about the state of his health, but also his grip on power. And more international news and updates in our special segment, Global Buzz. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Catherine Ashton, will meet Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif in Vienna tomorrow for talks which will hopefully end the standoff over Tehran's nuclear work. The talks are a preparation for final discussions that will eventually lead to a likely final deal by the 24th of November between Iran and the 6 global powers that it's engaged with. A powerful storm battered Japan with high winds and torrential rains, killing at least 2 people and causing injuries to many others. Japan's meteorological department says the storm had maximum wind speeds of 110 kilometers an hour. Nearly 80,000 people had to be evacuated. The Australian government will relax visa restrictions for skilled migrants as part of Prime Minister Tony Abbott's innovation and competitiveness agenda. Present rules allow skilled workers to work for up to 5 years in Australia. Senior clerics on the church have called on the Vatican to adopt a more positive stand vis-à-vis homosexuality. A preliminary report by bishops says that homosexuals had gifts and qualities that the church should not ignore. Over 200 bishops are taking part in the synod since the 5th of October. And that is some food for thought for the Catholic Church. That's a wrap of the news tonight, this Tuesday edition. From me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team, thanks for your time. We'll catch you again same time tomorrow. Good night.